where our water comes from. Any guesses? Anyone to shout out?
Reservoirs.
Yep, so basically, there are three sources. Our local reservoirs up on Mount Tam, and then there's two other that are outside of the Mount Tam watershed. Russian River through the Sonoma County Water Agency, we have about 25% of our water imported from them. And
It's done something weird.
that's weird. Well, that one up there says recycle. I'm not sure where it came from. That's weird. Anyway, and then about 2% comes from a recycle plant, and that water then goes generally toward irrigation. But basically, almost all of our water, whether it's our local reservoirs or Russian River, that comes from rainfall, and very localized rainfall. So on average, we get about 52 inches of rain up in our watershed at Lake Lagunitas at our rain gauge up there. But it varies very widely. And oftentimes, if it's not going to rain, we're completely through an irrigation system, completely through a irrigation season, I should say, before we may even know that we're actually in a drought, or that we're not, because we don't know from year to year what's going to happen. I mean, for instance, February, our rain gauge on Lake Lagunitas registered 0 inches, even with an extra day. 0 inches. And that's not great, because February is generally our highest rainfall month on the watershed. However, because we had a lot of rain in the beginning of the winter, we actually are above, I didn't put it on the slide, I think we're about 105, 108% of average storage for this year. So we're in good shape with storage, even though we're only about 75% of the rainfall that we usually get on average this time of the year. So basically, our water source is generally rainfall, whether it's here or the Russian River watershed, and so it's very dependent on that. And we'll go through this fairly quickly. So here's our different reservoirs. Basically, the point of this slide is our total reservoir capacity. If we get a lot of storms, if you see something in the paper, here's something that all the reservoirs are spilling. They're basically just giant bathtubs. You know, they get to a certain point and they spill over. We can't, stop that. That's how they're designed. So if they're totally full and everyone is spilling, we have about 79,500 acre-feet of water of storage. So basically, that's the size of a football field minus the end zones, a foot deep. And if you took all of our storage and put it on a football field, it'd be 79,500 feet tall, which is about 15 miles. And if you think about that, you might think, and if you saw that, you might think, that's enough water for 10 or 20 years for everybody. That's huge. Look at this column of water is huge. However, every single day we're drawing from those reservoirs to provide people with water. So we measure our rainfall and our storage in a fiscal year. So basically it goes from July 1st to June 30th, so it encompasses an entire winter. So the last data that we have, so basically we had a little under 25,000 acre-feet that's produced, goes through a water treatment plant, goes into our system, and everybody uses it for showering, for washing their clothes, and for irrigation. But there's also other water that we have to release from our system for stream inflows, for fish habitat. We're required to do that. Basically, at one point, we dammed streams to make giant lakes for reservoirs, and so we need to release water for environmental reasons for fish. And that's going to vary. It was about 9,600 acre-feet that last year. That varied by a couple thousand acre-feet depending on.
Not just fish.
Yeah. Just for general environmental. There's other aspects too.
There are a few other species besides fish.
Yeah, there's shrimp, freshwater shrimp, some other things as well.
Yeah, not just animals.
Yeah. And so those two things together for that particular year was about 34,500 acre-feet. And looking at our maximum storage, we say that's about a 2.5 year supply of water. Now, obviously, if there's a drought and certain targets, if our storage is at a certain level on April 1st, at or below, we start instituting voluntary rationing or even mandatory rationing or cutbacks or what have you. So that number's a little shaky, but that's generally what we say for our supply. Now, the reason again that we're promoting sustainable landscaping and native plants, and that generally can do that, we're reducing your irrigation loads because about 50% of our annual water use goes toward irrigation. A lot of that's overwatered, a lot of that's going to obviously not to non-climate appropriate plants. So that's a huge, huge portion of our water use, and the energy that's used to pump that water around as well. And so that's why we're doing this. Oh man, I'm going a lot faster than I thought I was going to. So I just want to talk about the, actually it's funny because I cut a bunch of slides out, and I have so much time. What are we going to talk about? So I want to talk about the inspiration part of the book, because that's really an important thing, is it's really, if you were interested in gardening, you've probably seen something in somebody else's garden, pictures or what have you. You might have walked around the grounds today and saw a grouping of plantings and say, oh, that'd be great, I like these things. So this is an example of one day I was driving through my neighborhood in San Rafael, and I just decided to take a different street out of the neighborhood for whatever reason. And I passed this house, and I looked over, and it didn't look like the house on this left, and its yard didn't look like the house on the right. I wish I would have taken a video, just driven down, and it just pops out. And so much to the fact that I stopped, and when none of the neighbors were looking, so they didn't think I was doing something nefarious, took out a camera and took a picture. I just loved it, again, because it's not just grass, not just turf. Picture doesn't do it justice. I should have probably zoomed in a little bit more. But it's just, to me, I thought it was beautiful. And I thought, wow, that's the kind of inspiring type of garden that's great in this kind of setting. So this happens to be my yard. Might look a little messy, but that's the way that it should really be. This was turf. This is a house, my first house. I just bought it 6 years ago. It was turf and some dying shrub and some other things. It was actually designed, when I looked at it, with low water use plants. They just weren't the plants that I wanted. I wanted to attract pollinators. I wanted to attract hummingbirds. And so I put this in, and it's kind of one of those things that's kind of like, when you put in a garden or a pollinator garden or whatever you want to attract, I found it to be very true that for the phrase, if you build it, they will come. If you build a baseball field in the middle of a cornfield, you might get baseball players showing up. And if you plant pollinator flowers or host plants, you will probably, I've learned, you will actually definitely get what you're looking for. So this is just a little, obviously you can figure out what this is, but this is something, the first year that I planted the garden, I put some milkweed and things in there for it because I wanted specifically to attract monarchs. And sure enough, I'd go out and I look out one day and there's a monarch flittering around the backyard, and I watch it go down the milkweed, and I just went and watched it. I was like, what's he doing? Is he laying eggs? What's going on? So about a week later, I kept checking, and sure enough, you see the little tiny, the first monarch caterpillars. And I'd go out with a little mother hen and I'd check them every day. How's everybody doing? What's going on? Watch them get bigger and bigger. And then they got nice and big, and then they started disappearing. I was like, I hope they've crawled off someplace and made a nice little home, which they did. So on the far left, there is the chrysalis of water. It's just about ready to emerge. I actually went around the yard. It was like an Easter egg hunt, and I found a dozen chrysalis underneath the eaves of the house, underneath the plants. And I kind of thought about it. I thought, man, that caterpillar was like this big, and it crawled like, for its distance, like 1,000 miles. It's crazy. So I watched it, and I was lucky enough to come home from work one day, and I went out, on the other hand, check and see what's going on, and so the one had just emerged from its chrysalis, and I went back a little later, and it was over on some sage sunning itself. So again, I'm confident in the kind of phrase, if you build it, they will show up. So talking about inspiration, this was, I just thought this was an interesting little thing that I came across. So I don't know if you can all see, but it says reward $300 for capture of plant thief by the Sonoma Police. This was actually in Sonoma. I drove there to meet a friend of mine, and I was like, oh, and there was a beautiful landscaped doctor's office, something like that. Not necessarily climate appropriate, but it was just beautiful. And I was like, oh, what does that sign say? And I walked over and I thought, wow, that's interesting. I wonder how many plants were stolen before they said, okay, we're gonna just put up a sign, say please do not. So the message here is you know, you might walk by a garden and take inspiration from it, but don't take the garden. That's what they're saying. So actually, wow, so I went through that much faster than I thought I would, so I guess that's good. So I'm not gonna be here for actually for the panel, so if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them about the water supply or the plants, just whatever, sure.
Do you have any idea what the water use was for that garden that you liked in San Rafael compared to like the neighbors and other landscaping jobs?
I don't, but I'm going to guess based on the plant material there. I don't know, I'm gonna guess, so turf grass here takes about 45 inches of water in the summer to stay green, like per square foot, you need for a column, you know, 45 inches of water. So I'm gonna guess with the plants that I saw, it's probably gonna be at least a third, only a third of that, so probably decrease the water use by at least 2/3. I wasn't bold enough to go knock on the door, and I thought it would be so intrusive to use my position at the district to look back at the water use records. Just for the record. I do, but it is interesting because I did go by, you know, later on in the year, and, you know, after the bloom period was done and everything, I thought, oh, not as impressive now, but I know, you know, what I actually haven't driven by recently, but I just knew, I was like, oh, that's like my yard, it, you know, looks great, and then some other things kind of, you know, they you know, kind of, they run their course for that particular season. Sure.
In the list of 113 plants that you have in the back of the book, do you have any idea of how fire prone the plants are? I mean, it says how much water they use, but on the other hand,
That's a very good question, and the question was, with the plant list that we have in the back of the book, if we have any idea how many of those are fire prone, I think was the user question. And I will say this, that I did, so we put this book together kind of before all the attention went to fires and fire plants and plant lists and what have you. And basically from different meetings I've been in recently and talking to Fire State Marine and some other very educated people, I don't know if I should get into this because I'm certainly not an expert, but a lot of the aspects of flammability of the plants is how they are cared for. And not just the plant itself. You may have, you know, great plants, and if they're cared for properly, they're pruned, or if it's just one specimen, it may be fine. But to get to your question, I cross-referenced it with the Fire State Marin plant list. There was one of our plants that were on, I think, their fire prone list, I guess you would say. I don't remember which one that was. I was kind of like, boy, that's not like half our plant list. But that's not to necessarily say that if you put that particular plant in your